afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Parliamentary Pavilion. My name is Malini Mehra, and I'm Chief Executive of Globe International. Delighted to welcome you to this really exciting session that we have. We've been planning it with Mustafa from Climate Innovation, and it's focusing on the issue of art, culture, and heritage, and how they intersect with the climate challenge. So we have some great ideas, Mustafa, that you're going to be sharing, that you've been cooking up with your own organization and also with the presidency. And then, of course, we're going to be hearing from Jessica and also from Alison. And Alison is somebody who's been working on these issues for a very long time with Julie's Bicycle. So very quickly, if I can just introduce each of you three, and then we'll kick off, Mustafa, with your presentation. So we've got Jessica Jacob, who is the CEO of Shawco, formerly with the Green Climate Fund, Mustafa Mokas, who is the CEO of Earth Technologies, ex with the World Bank, and Alison Tukel, who is a founder and the CEO of the intriguingly named Julie's Bicycle, and you will explain what that is. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to you, Mustafa, for your presentation to tell us all about your work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Malini, and thank you for having us at the Globe Parliamentary Pavilion. I'm also glad to share the stage with these two fantastic ladies that are trying to act for climate. So indeed, I have been committed for almost 20 years for climate finance within the UN, but also UNEP, and then through the World Bank, doing de-risking financing. So today my talk will be more about climate finance gap, which is how can we still reach the 2-degree scenario on one side, on one hand, and second, what is the challenge on the adaptation side. So we heard a lot of announcements from early COP about the mitigation. So today the gap is over 1.5 trillion yet on a yearly base. So the only way to reach that, when you compare that to the public money that is mobilized, which is the target is 100 billion for each developing country, we are still really far, even if we are not reaching the 100 billion for emerging country yet. So then private capital is one of the solutions. So the way to unlock that is through partnership. So partnership between philanthropy, partnership with DFIs, such as Green Climate Fund, and Jessica is a former Green Climate Fund staff, so she will explain to us a little bit the role of GCF, and the private capital. So early at the COP, during the Business and Philanthropy Forum, which was a very high success, we had Bill Gates, we had Lauren Jobs, and some others that really committed philanthropic money hand in hand with DFIs and private investors to do things that are really, let's say, measurable. So, however, on the adaptation side, the gap is huge. So if you track the last years on the mitigation, money has been increasing. But on adaptation, unfortunately, into 2022, it's decreasing. So today we need 58 billion for adaptation, small highland states, and Africa, which is like the most endangered countries that need to adapt now. So, and we are at less than 10 billion. So the question is, we have been having a lot of conversation during this COP28 year, and the art community came to us, art collectioners, different stakeholders, museums, and they wanted to mobilize art as a way to mobilize catalytic philanthropy. So this is the reason why we are today announcing the Art for Climate, which is a call that will mobilize finance from art. So I will go through the presentation. Perhaps the next slide.
Why don't you come here?
Yeah.
So you can see what you're talking about.
Sure. So, indeed, very beautiful picture. The next slide, please. So the Art17 Coalition, which we are launching today, is the world's first modern fine art auction series that help bridge the finance gap for adaptation, natural biodiversity. This coalition has, for example, ArtNet, which is the leading art data at the global scale for the value transparency of art, together with other stakeholders. The next one, please. So as I was mentioning, 58 billion climate adaptation investment. So 58 billion is what is needed for Africa. When the gap is huge, but when you dig deeper on small highland states, the gap is even worse. The tricky point is the countries that need the most finance are the ones that are the more vulnerable. So we have a double issue. And then when you go into biodiversity, which is incredible figure, the gap is 700 billion. So, and I think the COP in Brazil in 2 years' time is very important. So we really want to have that 2 years framework to mobilize. One last element I want to share is when you look at indigenous people, they protect over 2/3 of earth and land. So then, why? So we need to act more, let's say, more innovatively. The next one, please. So this is what we meant. I will give just a very concrete example. Allianz, global investor, one of the largest investors in the world, 700 billion under asset management. They just announced a week ago 1.1 billion financial mechanism using 25 million of philanthropic money from MacArthur Foundation, US, 110 million from FMO, which is the Dutch Development Bank, and 1 billion from private sector, and investing part of it in adaptation. So that type of innovative mechanism are what is needed actually to bridge that gap. So yes, so today launching the Art Coalition. So who is gathering? Art collectors, museums, auctioneers, so Christie's and others, not yet on board, but all they want to do to act. Philanthropic, art investors, and Climate and Biodiversity Foundation. For us, it's very important to say that money that is mobilized need to go to local foundation, not like the big foundation. They are too far from the field. So and now we have a series of foundations that are in Latin America, in Africa, in Asia. So trying to leverage those ones to mobilize. Also, we really want to track the impact. So each project will be vetted based on the impact on biodiversity and carbon metrics, because the real challenge is why private investors are not moving like at that scale, because they don't know, because they are afraid, they see risks. So then if we don't measure very transparently, and that's why we are using the blockchain technology and to really, through a partner, to really show that the projects that are financed have impact. That's really the idea. Next one. And together at this panel, we are joining the call to action for that my colleague will be talking about. So it's typically the same movement. So we are all joining forces to unlock the finance for climate. Sorry. So this is some of the pieces that are committed from art collectioners for the $1 billion, which is really the value of that art. Fine art auction series for climate adaptation during the next 2 years. So we have Boteros, Dali, Picasso's, Monet, very famous art collectors, artists owned by art collectors, a lot from Latin America actually, Colombia. And we are going to be featuring that during the next milestones. The milestones by itself. So we are going to have an event in Davos. Then we are targeting either one, Oscar, aside from Oscar, and Festival de Cannes. Why? Because one of the founding partners is one of the historic sponsor or co-actor of designer of the movie festival event. So Climate Week and hopefully the Future Investment Initiative in Saudi, in Riyadh in October, November 2024, and then targeting the following COP with a meaningful milestone at COP 30 in Brazil. So I think I'm done. So I'll be very happy to answer any questions, and I'll give the floor. I think will go back on the panel, right? And
Yeah, so I think what might work best is if you wish to make a presentation, make it from the lectern, we can sit there, and then I'll call you back here for the conversation. Yeah?
I don't have a presentation prepared, just
Okay, well, why don't you speak from
okay.
here? At the end, towards the end, yeah.
Well, good afternoon. So my name is Jessica Jacob. I know very well Mustafa for many long years. I am, we're a small group today, but I imagine very interesting subject. Let me tell you and share a little bit about myself. As I always say, I'm a weird animal or human being, but we're animals at the end. So my father is French. I was born in Colombia. My mom comes from an island in the Caribbean. So this subject of adaptation is kind of one of my priorities in life, and of course, climate change. So I'm a finance climate expert. It's a weird thing because I work in the financial sector, investment banks, development banks, private banks, microfinance. That was my past life, even if I look young. And then for the past around 15 years, I have been working in climate change and trying to raise different kinds of capitals, not to bring it to the developing countries. So through that story, I worked for more than 6 years at the Green Climate Fund, that I imagine you all know, the biggest climate fund in the world. And I was the regional manager for Latin America and the Caribbean. 2 years ago, after COVID, a lot of things happened, and in my life too. So I decided to quit the fund and realize that one of the most important things that were happening and gaps in developing countries is the need for the donors to understand the local context. So I created my own consultancy firm that covers all Latin America and the Caribbean, trying to find the best talent in our countries in the national and regional level, but as well in the local level, and always in all the consultancies that we undertake for the UN, for the GCF, for banks, etc. We always have local human talent that are providing the context of their country, of the region, province, village, etc. So we're trying to bring this approach, and related to this panel, I believe, as you all know the majority of the resources, around 80% of the climate finance resources are being invested in mitigation and just 20% in adaptation. So there's a huge gap on how these resources are being targeted for the most needed and vulnerable communities. So we know that for the past around 2-3 years, there's a lot of hope and efforts to be targeted more on adaptation. Even in the GCF, there's a mandate from the UNFCCC and the countries and the parties that these kind of international funds should focus and be able to really balance their portfolio between mitigation and adaptation. But there's a lot of challenges for developing countries, and even more if we think about seeds or even adaptation in the Amazon forest. And something that it's really kind of even funny sometimes, being I consider myself more Latin American. It's that we all speak, well, Brazil is the only one kind of generally that speaks another language, but they understand a lot of Spanish. And when we're speaking about helping Latin American countries, everybody says, oh, you have the same language, you have the same culture. It's not at all the same thing to do a project in Bolivia, even with indigenous peoples, than in Guatemala, no? So there's a huge difference of culture between these countries and within each of the countries, no? In my own country, Colombia, you find from a desert to the Amazon to the big mountains of Los Andes, and there's a huge, even sometimes I don't understand the accent of my own people. So something that I have realized and related to this panel is that you have to really, to do a good project in adaptation, you have to understand the culture of the end beneficiaries. And a very important tool that it's there to understand the culture is art. So this is a way, no, when you get into the field, and for example, mainly with indigenous cultures, you don't speak the same language at all, no? In, for example, Guatemala, I think they have more than 40 languages. Bolivia don't speak about it, no? So when we're doing a project, for example, but it's like, Jessica, no, yourself, you can make that work. I'm like, yeah, but I don't speak their language, and if it's a different region, even within the Amazon in different countries, they might speak more than 20 different languages. So a way to communicate it's trying to just see, no, understand, and arts translate a lot of that understanding of the communities. So I believe in, congratulations, Mustafa, for, no, this big effort. I know that you do so many things with the youth, with arts, etc., crowdfunding, among others. So it's really interesting, no, that finally climate change is being understood from all of the sectors, no, including these ones. And I was recently this week in a concert in the opera here in Dubai that was organized by the Echo Bay Museum, that it's the foundation that has the Museum of San Francisco in the US. From a person that it's kind of a genius, crazy genius, but nice one, that is called George Jacob. He has the same last name as me, but we're not family. That's why we understand very well each other. And he has this vision, no, that through, and he creates a lot of museums around the world that is really related to climate, no. So all the museums that he is developing or supporting or partnered with, he is incorporating this climate aspect, no, of the education, even if it's not clear directly. But no, when you understand him and really see the work that he's doing behind, he's really incorporating in it. In the San Francisco, for example, he's kind of renewing the museum, and it's all around oceans, no. So it's like the ambition to be the biggest climate ocean museum in the world, no. So you can really understand that there are people around the world already, no, seeing this complete correlation, no, between art, education, adaptation, no, through this kind of a culture. And no, coming back to my point at the beginning, the importance of understanding, no, the art, the culture, the languages of the beneficiaries that we're trying not to support through this kind of adaptation projects. And just to give you an example of a project that I did in Brazil, in one of the most vulnerable regions in Brazil. It's at the end of the Amazon River when it gets into the sea, and it's called Marajó. So they're tiny islands at the end of the river, and they live through fishery and agriculture. That's their way of living. And we were hired in Sureco, in my company, to develop the financial model of the project, the exit strategy, to be able to present that proposal to the GCF, to the Green Climate Fund. So I had two consultants from Brazil, obviously experts in finance, because that was not what we were mandated to do. And within the budget of the consultancy, there was no mission into the field. And I say, even if I have to take it from the total budget that I am allowed to in the consultancy, I called my two consultants in Brazil, and they were very fancy finance guys. And I say, I'm sorry, you have to put your tennis shoes and you have to go to Marajó. So like, yeah, but no, we can do the financial model from a desk. I said, like, no, it's not going to be the same. Well, they called me from Marajó, from a buffalo they were riding, and say, like, really almost crying that it was completely different to develop the financial model, understanding the local context, the needs, the people, and it was transformed completely, no? So at the beginning, the idea of the project was with a foundation, a regional foundation that is called Fundación Avina, and it was a grant, no? Because we always think that adaptation should be grants, no? Another story, Lost and Damaged. I believe that there you need grants. But on adaptation, sometimes you don't need only grants, no? So I said, let's think about a revolving fund. So we can receive grants, for example, and the project was recently approved in the last board meeting of the GCF, and it was clapped as really one of the most innovatives on adaptation. And what we did is that with the grants, part of the grants were allocated to buy technologies that they needed, to make more resilient practices. And we were going to rent for a tiny amount of resources that technology to the farmers. And with that, we created a fund, and that was going to be the way of maintaining the technology, for example, over time, and we negotiated with a local bank to give an interest rate very interesting for that fund, so it could generate extra resources. And then when the GCF gets out and there are no more resources coming from the international side, they would be able to have resources and continue investing in new technologies, in seeds, etc. So it was something that it's looks like amazing, but it was just understanding that they were ready to go to a bank, take a loan to buy a technology. And then it was even smarter to buy technologies, to share them, rent it for a tiny amount, and then they could create and regenerate resources. So that was approved very recently. I was speaking with the person that hired us, and then now they're hiring us for another adaptation project in Mexico related to water. So we always have to try to think out of the box. And the best way of thinking out of the box is understanding the local context. We don't have always the solutions or the answers to what they need. We have to go there, understand the local context, understand the culture, speak to the beneficiaries, see what they're capable or not to do, and then there's a better way to give them a hand and to find more sustainable projects, and then attract, of course, additional resources from the private and the public sector. So that was what I wanted to share with you. Thank you.
Wow, thank you both, Mustafa and Jessica. Amazing projects. And I'm speaking. I don't have slides either, so I'll just speak straight from here. I am speaking from the arts and cultural end of this work, and it's so fantastic to hear about those absolutely critical enabling structures that we've missed for so long. A little bit about myself and where I come from, and then I'll move into what we're doing here at COP28. So my name's Alison Tickell. I'm the founder and director of Julie's Bicycle. She feels like my spouse. I've been with her for far too long. We founded in 2007. I was working at the time in two contexts. One is community context. My background actually is community inclusion and how to use art to really focus on issues of inclusion and community. And I also come from a family of climate scientists, and it felt very obvious that at the time that these two worlds were not coming together, and that we were doing a lot of gestural work. So I was working in the music industry at the time. I thought, right, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do a carbon footprint of the whole UK music industry, and as soon as everybody works out what's going on, they'll change. And that was my first act of huge naivety. It was very, very, very useful, though. Speaking to your point, Mustafa, about the need to collect evidence of all kinds in order to create two things. One is how to enable really good decision making, and the second is to reduce risk. How to act as a critical mass. How does culture work as a critical mass? Really, really important. Very briefly, since that time, we've been on a really long journey. We have thousands and thousands of collections of data. We do four key things. We work in a very granular way with cultural organizations and clusters of organizations all over the world now. That issue about partnership, understanding the locality, enabling where you can, moving away whenever and as quickly as you can, they are all critical conditions for success. So we work increasingly to enable organizations and clusters and networks of organizations to become really independent and to facilitate that shift. At any given time, we might be working with well over 1,000 cultural organisations. The reason I say that is because arts, and it's largely arts and arts mainly, creative industries, music, and a little bit of museums on the other side. People are longing to take action. That's the critical thing. People understand that actually in order to move into this field, you need to be doing. It's not enough to talk. You have to be doing and actually tracking what you're doing. So that's the first thing. The second thing that is worth saying is that in 2012, Arts Council England, my Arts Council, made environmental reporting a policy and an action plan. This is a long time ago, a funding requirement to receive public funds, saying that it was not good enough to be in receipt of public funds and therefore to have a relationship with social good without understanding that we had to work on climate together. And that, we've still run that program. We developed a set of measurement tools, both qualitative, showing how commissioning, reputation, value, audiences, the role of arts in changing values across society, as well as, crucially, our carbon footprint. Now, that portfolio of almost 1,000 organisations, big, small, theatres, dance, festivals, that they fund have reduced their greenhouse gas emissions collectively by over 60%. And we're now working with the biggest organisations they fund, like the Royal Opera House, the South Bank Centre, energy-hungry creatures, who also attract very big audiences on science-based targets to reach net zero as quickly as possible. In 1 year, that consortium of 30 organisations representing 80 sites reduced their greenhouse gas emissions by over 30%. So this is really rich work that we can do if we commit to disclosure, to accountability, and to common frameworks. So that's the other area that we do. That is also about governance. So we're working with boards. It's about how to meet net zero, but it's also about recognising the diversity of the sector. It really is a very rich sector, big and small, welcoming people into a space in which they can take climate action together as a full sector. So it's a lovely programme. We've loved it, and we've got a really, really long data set. It also has attracted people from all over the world to join that data set. So we've licensed it in many parts, particularly of Europe, but also Latin America, because people want to take action. So we've got this lovely longitudinal research of greenhouse gas emissions and qualitative things. The third thing we do, and this is more recent, is really around climate justice. So our journey has been from carbon footprints to deep justice-led, ethical, focused work, which actually really centrally is about adaptation. I'm really glad you brought that up. It's such a critical part. It's also about understanding the causes and consequences of climate, colonialism, and the way that it is still being manifest now in our own communities as well as on a world stage. What we're finding is that with arts organisations who are very used to conversations about justice and fairness, there's an immediate relationship with climate justice. We did some research in 2020 in the run up to COP 2021 at cultural policies globally. We found that cultural policies globally talked about inclusion, democratic placemaking, around justice, fairness, equity. Almost none of them mentioned climate change. Almost none of them mentioned 1.5, and yet these are critically climate issues. So there's a huge disjunct there. And we run leadership programs on justice in deep partnership. So we facilitate those. And the fourth thing we do is policy. Because policy is such a critical enabling force for climate action in culture, and there has been a gaping gap. And now I'm going to come on to this really, really important piece of work. So we joined a really exciting network of global activists called the Climate Heritage Network. And I'd like to just point to the Alif Foundation, to Bastien in the audience, who has been really helpful in facilitating this work. So we joined when it was founded in 2017 to represent largely heritage. And I really want to make it very explicit, as we've been talking about the relationship between cultural heritage and climate. So tangible and intangible heritage is being lost all the time. It's not just our sites, it is our sites, our monuments, our spaces, our places, but it's also our language, our beliefs, our customs, the very nature of who we are in relation to ourselves, our communities, and this gorgeous planet we inhabit. It's absolutely critical. And I would say it is almost brutal that we have had no climate policy that explicitly valorizes the critical importance of cultural heritage on the ground. And so that relationship between climate narratives, climate priorities, mitigation, adaptation, loss and damage, and cultural heritage has been very damaging. We can also extend it to arts, storytelling, sensualities, how we feel the world around us. We've taken this out of climate dialogue. We've made it so dry, so alienating, so difficult. We actually need to feel this. We all feel it in our hearts. We feel the grief, the loss, the joy of coming together, the critical way that we can communicate differently to ourselves and one another, how we can feel this. And the third area is creative industries, design, fashion, media, film, music, these hugely lifestyle and shaping industries. This has been absent from the climate dialogue, and it is insane. We need to rectify it. Climate Heritage Network is led by a terrific heritage lawyer who understands the UNFCCC really well, and we have really needed that. Cultural voices have really needed to bring that gap between the bureaucratic, the technocratic, which is the world of climate, and the understanding of the critical importance of culture and the arts. Last year, his name is Andrew Potts. I have to raise him. He's been amazing. Last year, we were in Sharm el-Sheikh. We managed, through the huge mobilization of many voices and people with us, we managed to, many people managed to get cultural heritage recognised within the loss and damage framework of the Sharm el-Sheikh implementation plan. That was really helpful. But it increased our confidence and our ambition. This year, on November the 8th, we launched a call to action to civic society to mobilise behind the idea of putting culture, that's heritage, arts, creative industries, at the heart of climate policy, to bring people into this process. We've had a huge response globally. It's kind of overwhelmed us. Really big organisations representing many thousands of museums, of places, and lots of individuals. Our civic voice is strong, it's mobilising, it's getting bigger and bigger. And just to say, it's important that it isn't just culture. We want to include finance in this. We want to include policymakers. We want to include all the people who really recognise that culture needs to be used to very, very good effect now. And we have no time to lose. Yesterday, we launched the Group of Friends. Now, this has been really exciting for us. The Group of Friends is a ministerial coalition led by Khalid Al-Qasimi, who is the Minister of Culture for UAE, and Margaret Menezes, who is the Minister of Culture for Brazil, who are co-chairing a group of friends consisting of, at the moment, over 30 ministers of culture from all over the world, who are supporting this work to develop a different framework for culture. They passed unanimously the Emirates Declaration on Culture-Based Solutions for Climate Action. It was really exciting, really exciting. And we're going to take it forward. Our goal is to table and get approval next year in Baku, a joint work decision, which will trigger a year-long consultation with creative and cultural and arts activists and networks all over the world to really understand what culture-based climate action needs to look like and how that can be reflected in policy frameworks. Because you've described beautifully, both of you, the gaps between this wonderful movement that has mobilized. Many people never lost their way, as you say, indigenous communities who hold so much knowledge, so much wisdom, but also community activists. Organizations everywhere have been mobilizing in a vacuum around climate action, and we desperately need to address that. So great that you're going to sign the call to action, and I invite everybody else to do that. Thank you.
Fantastic. So I think the one thing that you all have in common is enormous reserves of passion. So I'm going to ask you to come to the front because this was really intended as an appetizer. First of all, to bring you together because you're working on different elements of the climate and arts and culture challenge, to connect the dots. I want to just spend a couple of minutes talking about the broader context. Why it is that you're here at the Parliamentary Pavilion. And you're here because whatever measures come out of here are going to be subjected to accountability. And who is the main institution for accountability in all of our societies? It's parliaments. Parliaments are sovereign. The people aren't sovereign, it's parliaments which are sovereign. And what we've had for far too long is a lack of accountability in the institutions and in the international policy context. So, Jessica, every year you mentioned the GCF, the Green Climate Fund. So we've asked the Green Climate Fund to come here. They're going to be joining us in an hour or so to be talking about the work that they're doing. Why have we invited them? Because they need to account themselves to members of parliament. So, of course, the GEF, which is the other, the Global Environment Facility, and the GCF produce these kind of reports. These are accountability reports to the donor organizations, to the countries. They don't produce them for parliaments. And that's the next step. Because when you have initiatives such as the art collectors for climate finance and adaptation, we want to make sure that that money is well used. So I just want to mention one other thing that in your milestones, you talked about the milestones from here until COP30. One of the key ones is going to be for next year. It's going to be London Climate Action Week in June. Because, of course, the work that you have pioneered so impressively, Alison, it started out in London. And London, we started in 2019, the first ever whole of society transforming a major global city initiative in London in 2019. And the engagement of the arts, culture, creative communities was absolutely central to that. So on the first day, we had a launch in the House of Commons in Parliament with the female equivalent of Banksy's work. So you're all familiar with Banksy, I'm sure, but you're probably not familiar with Bambi. And Bambi had been inspired by the climate strikes and Greta Thunberg. She's an unknown artist, just like Banksy is. But she'd produced an artwork, a portrait of Greta Thunberg. We brought that into Parliament and we kicked off that day with a spoken word poem by the young woman who had just been nominated the spoken word awardee at the Roundhouse. So there are umpteen ways in which we have engaged with artists, the cultural communities, because of course they are very often the most profound influential communicators of the challenge as well as the solution. So there's a lot to say there in terms of the ways that we can intersect. That's for the conversation after today, because today has really been to broker this conversation. So let me now open it up. I know that there are some quick questions. I know, Mustafa, that you have to run away, but let's capture a little bit of the enthusiasm from the audience themselves. So, Adil, you had a question.
Yeah, so the way it's designed actually by the coalition is to have like art owners selling their piece of art at a like floor price or top price, let's say. So, and then they find any profit that is done will be reversed according to a formula to the local foundations. Then all the cost of like auctioneers and the cost that will be out of that piece. So that's the way it can be sustainable. Because when it's a donation, then you can't sustain the model. And then that's really the way. Then when we will be able to use that philanthropic like money for real project, you can again catalyze extra money on the project. So it's really trying to use that extra money in the field to mobilize even more money. So it's a multiple effect, and you can do that only if you track the impact. So if you don't track the impact over time, then you are not able to prove that and sustain. I hope it's clear.
Yeah, thank you. Any others? Questions? Comments? Please do introduce yourself.
Yes, my name is Emmanuel Janis. I'm the Development and Partnerships Manager at Louvre Abu Dhabi. So, first of all, thank you very much. Your presentations were amazing. I just wanted to say that the role of museums within this whole movement of raising funds, battling the climate change, I think it's very crucial because of the legitimacy that the museum institutions bring to this cause. Usually, especially in small communities, they are being seen as more traditional, but at the same time, more institutions that they provide this legitimacy to whatever is happening around, regardless of the government entities or external agencies that they are coming to assist. So that, for me, is something very important in order to be part of the movement and at the same time to be part of the awareness raising towards the general public of this thing. So thank you very much from my point of view, the museum point of view.
So thank you so much. Hi, Hindu. Nice to have you. So if I can just respond to that, because we're talking about two things here. We're talking about the awareness raising aspects of it, but also how the museums themselves, the wider collection, the collectors community can also finance adaptation. I'll give you one example of how museums are really just leaning into this issue in London. So when we started London Climate Action Week, we went to the British Museum. Yeah, largest collection. They can showcase the history of human adaptation to climate change over millennia. And the way in which we work with them is because so many museums now have efforts to engage children, young people, families in their collections. And every June, when we have London Climate Action Week, we come out with a curriculum for all of London's 3,600 schools. And part of that uses London as the classroom for children to understand what climate change means. So we went to the British Museum and they had an exhibition for 6 months on the impact of climate change on Arctic communities. So we work with them to incorporate that in the curriculum, and over a number of days, and unfortunately this coincided with COVID, so much of this went online, but that's the beauty of it. You can transfer it online. So these are the new ways in which communities, schools can engage on that learning journey with museums. Yeah, but there are many, many other innovations such as that.
So in Louvre Abu Dhabi, we are thinking about sustainability as everyone else, but we are very conscious about sustainability. So what we want to do is also launch a sustainability fund, not only to transform the museum from the building that it's quite energy consuming to something more sustainable, but also looking at everything that goes into sustainability, from sustainable production to sustainable consumption to everything, to create a platform to transform the museum as a platform of awareness of the millions of guests that we are having every year, not only children but also adults, about what the museum can do to help this movement and help these efforts.
Thank you. So I think that here, I mean, this is turning into a roundtable now, but I think here you'll find many partners who can help you both with that structural transition as well as the engagement with all stakeholders. I just want to acknowledge our colleague and dear friend Hindu Amara, who has joined us. And Alison, I know you want to come in on that point, but Mustafa, you also. So
yes, I just wanted to. Hindu has very few minutes, so I would like to introduce Hindu. So thank you so much for being with us. So the panel is about how to mobilize new philanthropic catalytic money for biodiversity, nature adaptation, including autochthon population. So I would like to hear a little bit from you, your perspective on the need and what are your key message after following days of COP, please.
Sure. Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for the invitation. I'm so sorry, running from one meeting to another meeting, so then I apologize before that I leave. So as indigenous peoples, firstly, we do not divide nature here, like biodiversity there, climate here, desertification here. All is in the same land. So when we have the floods or the droughts, it's not only mean the climate impact for our peoples, but it's mean also the species of the nature that we are losing. So maybe it's easy when we face it like the global floods is flooding how many peoples, but we are not counting how many species of the nature that are getting flooded. And each species of the nature that disappearing is the balance of the ecosystem that we are missing. So financing for climate, for biodiversity, for fighting desertification is very crucial to come not only on the commitment, but in the true cash. I give you the examples on the COP26 in UK. When we had the pledge of 1.7 billion to direct access finance for indigenous peoples. We come last year at the COP27, so we asked for the report, only 7% went to indigenous peoples. 83% went back to the business as usual. Government, UN institutions, big organizations. And even the 7% we ask, like, where is the money? You cannot understand, like, which organization that get it. So using the name of indigenous peoples and pledging, and at the end of the day, you do not see the cash, cannot help us to fight climate change, cannot help us to restore biodiversity. So which kind of new sustainable way of raising the direct access finance that we want? So after that, we work over 1 year. We come up with 10 principles and guidelines who help what is the direct access finance. Firstly, it is how indigenous peoples define what they want. It's not that people think that they have the money, they can decide for the peoples. No. So how the funding peoples, the financial peoples can change the way of doing business. They call themselves like donors. And then for the indigenous peoples and other recipients or beneficiaries. So the time that you are donor here and beneficiaries there, that means you do not have the same right to take the decision. And that means you already blocking the way to give direct access and to give an impact. So how we can do a financial partners and ecological partners? Because we are protecting nature, 80% of the biodiversity. So your money that you get from nature, you must use that to implement it. So today, on the direct access finance for the adaptation fund, we are very happy to see the direct access window is going to open. And we are happy because they are asking us from the beginning, we are launching that. So then we can discuss with them, if you are launching it, how we can get access. My final point is, here at the COP, there was 70 billion announcement between nature, climate, water, health, and we are talking more about the loss and damage, but loss and damage is just like small compared to all the rest. So all those commitment, how we can let indigenous peoples to create the mechanism that we want, from the philanthropic to the private, then those mechanisms can be fit and we can do the real action on the ground, and we come to the next COP with a monitoring to say how much from the 70 billions that went to the ground, how much we reduce the emission, how much we restore the biodiversity, how much we fill the gap between developing and developed country. We don't want to do business as usual, fitting all the renewable energy, all the money to the developed world. So we need the equity and justice on those money, and especially for the communities who are protecting the nature.
Thank you so much, Hindu. And we are very, very short of time. We actually have gone over time. So, Alison, I really want you to come in and explain a little bit more that really evocative term that you used, culture-based solutions. Help us close round this
Wonderful.
session.
Well, thanks so much for that incredibly important intervention. And just pulling together the museum. So we've been working, one of our alumni on our Creative Climate Leadership Program is somebody called Philip Kusasa, who works in Undao. It's a region in Zimbabwe. He redefined the museum so that the museum is the forest in which he lives, he stewards, his community stewards. He has been working tirelessly for many years to develop a new concept of the forest, which is about a much richer relationship, where the relationship between the museum as built environment and the museum as his heritage, his community's heritage, has been really finely tuned. He has utterly lacked the support that he needs, the infrastructural support that he needs. He's been raising money in all sorts of creative ways. He celebrates the museum through pushing on local festivals of dance. This is a fully integrated model of adaptation. He's just extended his museum to include the river as a verb. And this is where this idea of how we create narratives, how we conceive of what arts and culture is, really needs to open up and widen. So this is the invitation.
It is. I mean, it's one fantastic example. But Alison, we have so many fantastic examples. We've got so much expertise, and it would be remiss of me as an Indian not to mention that in the south of India we have an open air museum called Hampi, and Hampi is the site of ancient villages in India. And they have been beautifully, sympathetically restored, and you can experience life now. It's all solar powered. So there are some myriad of really good cultural best practice out there. I will have to close this conversation down now, but I encourage you all to share your business cards, because we would love to have a new mechanism emerging out of this, and of course support for the really important work that you're doing, Alison. So thank you so much for joining us here, and many more have been joining via the live stream. So thank you and have a good afternoon.